I'm Katie Wells, host of the Maximized Minimalist podcast. I escaped the hamster wheel of modern-day motherhood, overwhelmed by clutter and buried under the mental load. Now I live in a home that feels calm, manageable, and made for real life. I have margin in my days, energy for who matters most, and time for slow mornings and silly dance parties in the kitchen with my family. With over 5 million listens, the show has helped women around the world turn their homes into their happy place. Around here, we simplify for more peace, more presence, and more joy. We choose grace over guilt and progress over perfection. And we believe your home should give back more than it takes. I'm here to help you do the same. Come along with me and my guests as we share the real stories, habits, and strategies that help you lighten the load from the inside out. Pull up a seat, friend, and let's do this together. Ready, set, simplify. We don't just move our stuff when we move our stories. And sometimes we're not even sure why we're bringing them. Maybe you've done it too. I certainly have hauled boxes across state lines, across town, or across the hallway into a new season without ever asking yourself, do I even want this? Maybe you didn't have time to decide, so you packed it just in case. But here's what I've seen again and again. Those just in case boxes, they rarely make life easier. And most of the time, we all know how the story ends. They just make our load heavier. And by the way, this isn't just an episode for people with a U-Haul reservation. This is for anyone at a transition point, whether you're starting a new job, moving into a new season of parenting, or maybe you just simply feel the urge to create more space in your life. And here's a question I would love for us to sit with today. If I had to pack up my entire home tomorrow, what clutter would I regret bringing along? In other words, if I had a fresh start tomorrow, what would I not want to carry into my next chapter? So today I'm going to walk you through 6 different things people almost always wish they left behind. Some are obvious, some sting a little, but all of them are an invitation to lighten your load, my friend, and carry forward only what matters. So let's start with one of the biggest culprits, and that is boxes you never opened from your last move. Okay. I read years ago, don't know if this is still accurate, but the average American moves every 7 years. So what is that number for you? Of course, I have clients who've been in their home for 20 years, and then I have clients where that seems to ring true about every 7 years. And think back to your last move, and you might not even need to think about that move. You might know where those boxes are still sitting in your garage, your basement, your attic, your crawl space. If you didn't need it in your current home, odds are you won't need it in your next home either. But here's the truth. Unopened boxes that have been sitting, literally collecting dust, sometimes I think to our brains feel off limits because deep down we know what might be inside. Maybe it's photos, old letters, keepsakes, memories we haven't had the time or maybe the emotional capacity to process. And so they stay sealed. And I will say these can be exceptionally tricky because it's even easier than more obvious stressful clutter that's in the way of our day-to-day lives. So it's an easy can to kick down the road. I'll get to it later. And the next thing you know, we have a move in 4 weeks and we're like, oh, I probably should have spent time going through these boxes, right? And so they stay sealed, not just because of clutter necessarily, but because of avoidance. But you have to remind yourself, and again, for everyone even not moving, there's a cost to delaying making those decisions. Because I can promise you, when you do have a move on your calendar, you're not going to have the time or create the time to go through sentimental or go through those boxes with all that stuff in there because they're tucked away. But, on the flip side of the coin, which we often talk about on the show, there's always a flip side of that coin. They're silently taking up mental space too. And they have been this entire time you're in your current home. Every unopened box is a low grade stressor. I had one student just recently, she went through a move and she's like, I've hauled this box across 3 different states and the box had a Sharpie marked on it, said random office stuff. She was like, Katie, I'm not doing it anymore. She opened it. There was way more than random office stuff. She found like receipts from her wedding, like a broken stapler, an old journal. She was like, Katie, I laughed, I cried, and I kept 1 pen from my first job. That was it. And she hauled that around, breaking her back multiple moves. Again, we all do it, but let this be your gentle reminder. You don't have to process all of those boxes right this second or today, but you can choose one box. If it hasn't earned your attention in years, it doesn't need to earn space in your next season. So choose one box to start and start releasing and curating, right? We aren't collecting, we're curating. We did a really great episode on that recently. So you can ask yourself, is this truly meaningful or is this just a delayed decision? From the things we've never bothered to open, I want to move into the projects we'd swore we'd finish. Those someday projects that half-done scrapbooks, the craft kits, the yarn you were definitely going to knit a really cozy blanket with someday, right? We don't keep these because we love them. We keep them because of who we'd hoped we'd be, because we hope to finish them. Of course, no one starts a project with the intention of half doing it. One client told me she had a bin of quilt fabric she'd saved from when her clients were babies, and her youngest was 32. So 30 plus years she'd been hanging on to this quilt fabric thinking, oh, like maybe I should just keep it because it reminds me of this goal I had, which was to make this quilt. And I told her maybe the version of you who lets it go is the one who finally breathes easier, because she recognized that even though in a sense it was this aspirational clutter sitting in a box, that anytime she saw it, she felt bad. She felt bad because she never followed through or executed or outsourced or did it herself. So again, there's two sides to the coin. Yes, these things can encourage us, but if it's more of a burden than a benefit, then I think it's time we really start looking at those someday projects or half-finished projects through a new lens. And one great question to ask yourself here, friend, is if I had the time and space tomorrow, would I actually want to do this? Would I want to knit this blanket? Would I want to finish this scrapbook? Would I want to make this baby book, even though my kid's like 10 years old? If the answer is no, you're not quitting. You're simply freeing yourself to say yes to something else that fits you better right now in this season. Okay, so let's zoom out because this one is so rarely talked about, but anytime I have a client assess this category, moving or not, they're like, oh my gosh, my house feels so much better. Furniture that doesn't fit your home or life anymore. All right. Maybe it was expensive. Maybe it was passed down from a family member. Maybe it used to work beautifully in your home or apartment in your 20s, and now your couch is killing your back when you're sitting on it. But if it's not fitting your style, your space, or your life anymore, it's not serving you. And I will be the first to say, as a 37-year-old, life's too short to sit in an uncomfortable couch. Really. I mean, I'll just say it. One client moved a huge china cabinet she inherited from her aunt, and it didn't even fit through the door. They had to remove the hinges. Once it was finally inside, it was taking up this massive section on her wall. She couldn't even reach the light switch for the room. And she was like, I've had this sitting in here for years, I think like 20 years. And I really only kept it out of guilt. And I felt like I had to. And she said, Katie, I just needed someone to tell me like I didn't have to keep it and I could honor my aunt in other ways. And I certainly have by keeping these other things from her, frames, jewelry. So consider this your someone, right? You're allowed to outgrow furniture and the version of you it belonged to or the home you used to have that it lived in. I want to move on to something now deceptively small, but I think for a lot of us, especially if you consider yourself a reader or a lifelong learner or a teacher, it can be equally heavy and more emotionally, that is. Well, actually physically too. So books you feel guilty for not reading. And we could zoom out and talk about books that you plan on never reading again, whatever that looks like for you. For me, as someone who used to acquire books and I couldn't keep up with my pace of buying them to reading them, they held a lot of guilt for me. And I think books can bring obviously so much joy and meaning and nostalgia, but I think Again, honesty really gives us the answers we need. Books are also some of the heaviest things to move from a very physical standpoint. Take it from me, who hauled, I think, 3 massive boxes of all of my husband's college textbooks from chiropractic school back in like 2011. We hauled it from Iowa to North Carolina, and then we switched cities. So I think it was 2 or 3 moves. And I told him, like, dude, you're never going to read these again. These are going to be obsolete in 2 years. I gave him all, I really, really laid it on thick. And he's like, well, maybe I will. What if I need it? I get it, right? Those educational textbooks. And so finally, again, I'm not saying we did all this perfectly, but here is what he and I both regretted, is not taking the time to curate that collection so we didn't have to haul it across the country multiple times. And maybe for you, it's not educational old college textbooks. It's like novels or self-improvement books. And you keep saying, I'm going to get to these when life slows down. But if your life hasn't slowed down in 10 years and you're not intentionally desiring to carve out the time to read those books, if you've carried the same unread titles from apartment to attic, it's not a reading list. It becomes a guilt pile at some point. So in my humble opinion, let your bookshelf reflect what you love and want to return to. Now we're going to go into one for a lot of parents, maybe grandparents here, caregivers. And this is sentimental kid items you don't know what to do with. The baby shoes, the tiny socks, the scribble drawings that say, I love you, Mom. Oh man, it hits home, right? I'm like tearing up as I say this. My kids are 8 and 10, and so it was just Mother's Day a couple months back, and I still have the Mother's Day little art craft from my son on the fridge. I'm like, I'm going to keep this up here because they're in a season where like this stuff is becoming fewer and fewer and far between, right? If you have kids that are getting up in age, you totally understand. And some of that stuff, I get it. Like I'm going to keep some of this stuff forever. And that's a thing, I think. Maybe if you're new to this show, you're like, oh, it's called Maximize Minimalist. She's going to tell me to like digitize everything and take photos and like just trash it. No, that's not what we do here. Curating is obviously a word I've said, I think 3 times on the show. And that is really what we do on the show and as simplifiers. And the stuff I'm referencing here isn't the stuff that like you're keeping it for the short and long term. It's the stuff that you just like simply don't know what to do with. And typically, again, it's like there's sometimes guilt attached to it until you realize maybe you've got 6 bins of old kids' clothes. And again, your youngest is like 14 and you're like, I need to start going through this. One mom, a client of mine told me she cried over a pair of little rain boots from when her kid was like a toddler. When she decided to go through these boxes, she kept her favorite 5 items. The rain boots didn't make it, even though they made her tear up. And she let the rest go. And she said, now when I open that 1 bin, right? She went from 6 bins or something like that to 1. I smile instead of get overwhelmed and paralyzed or just like overly guilt-induced emotion. And she goes, I can actually like go through this box once a year, and it can really serve a really great purpose of that season of life I do want to remember, and I do want to look back on occasion with my time. So ask yourself, what's the memory here, and what's just a duplicate? Going back to curation, if you could really just objectify it as best as you can, rate these items. I know that sounds weird to do, but it's always helped me and a lot of my clients. Like rate 1 to 10. Ones are like duds, like, don't feel anything about it. I don't even remember. I don't have a photo or a memory of my kid wearing this, whatever. I mean, it's just like, it just happens to be in this box. 10s, 8s, 9s, and 10s are like, oh my gosh, I remember the day you wore this. I remember how I felt. I remember crying, watching you, take your first whatever steps. That is what I'm talking about here. Like your 8s, 9s, and 10s. And when you think of an art curator, the curation in a museum, it tells a story. It's the best of the best. Like if you just walked into a museum and it was a collection of an artist's stuff with no rhyme or reason, and it's like, here's some practice stuff that the artist did. They're not proud of it, but we're keeping it because it's his, right? You would be like, pretty underwhelmed by maybe the quality and also overwhelmed by the amount, right? So curate. Keep your 8s and 9s and 10s. And you don't need 5 or 6 bins to remember one sweet season of your kiddo's life or of your life. Okay. Finally, let's talk about some really tiny things that tend to sneak under the radar. And that is pantry and bathroom extras you thought you'd use. I'm talking like half-used spice jars. Maybe you bought a specific spice for one recipe, you cooked the recipe, you hated the recipe. Now you have that spice that's been in your pantry for 10 years. Expired soups, the stash of hotel shampoos or sample shampoos you somehow thought you'd need someday. I was just laughing really hard. It just reminded me in the 90s, of course, I think everyone listening probably has memories from the 90s. And I used to grab the perfume samples, that are like on the sticky pages, like the little edge that you could smell it. And I would rub that. And when I was like, 12, 13, 14, I would collect those. I would rip them out of my grandma's magazines when I went to her house. And hey, they started to sneakily accumulate in my bathroom as a teenage girl. Maybe you got samples when you bought a product online, whatever that is. These tend to add up in these spaces like our kitchens and bathrooms and travel size toiletries, all these things. Some are consumables, great if they're a consumable and you don't want to waste it. Find an organization to donate it to or be intentional about going through it and get them organized and faced in a way that you can see them so you don't forget about them, because totally the phrase that is out of sight, out of mind rings true 1,000%. I had a client who recently shared she had an entire bin in her bathroom filled with travel size toiletries that anytime she went to the grocery store, she would just be tempted by them. She's like, they're so cute and I like the size, but then she wouldn't use them, right? We all have our thing. And then she's like, you know what, Katie, I don't want to haul these across the country again. I don't have time to use them before my move. So she found a charity in her area just through using Google, right? And they took all of it very gladly. And the people were so excited and thrilled to have some new products to give to their clientele. I know these things seem small, but when you multiply them over years and moving with them multiple times, they become very, very sneaky space stealers. A really great question for this type of thing. Would I buy this again today? Would I buy this, exotic spice again today? No, because I hated the flavor. No. Okay, let it go. All right. As we wrap up, moving isn't just about boxes and bubble wrap. It is a chance to decide what gets to come with you and what you leave behind. Even if you're not planning a move, life is full of transitions and so many seasons. And all of these are an opportunity to ask, what am I dragging with me that I don't even want anymore? Maybe it's a box, a belief, or a version of yourself. Whatever it is, it's okay to let it go and give yourself permission to do that, girl. And I'll give you permission. If you can't do it, I'm giving you permission. If you need help getting started, I've totally got you. I have a free guide called 75 Things You Can Quickly Declutter. It is packed with super quick wins that'll have you feeling lighter in minutes. So thanks for being here. You can grab that free guide at the link in my show notes here, wherever you're listening to the podcast. And hey, remember, you are not behind. You are just in process. All right, friend, you know what to do. Ready, set, simplify. Bye.